Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Janab Sardar Masood Khan, President AJK, and it's all of Jammu and Kashmir. Excellencies, the joint hosts today, Muhammad Shabash Bey and Shamshad Ahmed, ladies and gentlemen, honorable MPs from different countries, researchers, scholars, thought leaders, thank you very much for all being here and inviting many of us to come here and speak about Kashmir and what is going on there. I say thanks to everyone in the room because I believe that everyone here is surely committed to not just solving international disputes, but investing in power that rests, that draws legitimacy from order, law, and justice, not the naked use and flagrant misuse of power as we see and has been ably said before us in Kashmir today and in many parts of the world, including Palestine. Everyone spoke about 108 days of curfew. And the excellent speaker before me, it's very hard to speak after Lord Nazir, by the way. I do it all the time, and it's just a challenge. So thank you for that erudite speech, Lord Ahmed. But 108 days of curfew in which an entire people have been living under unspeakable conditions of torture, deprivation, state-sanctioned torture, not just torture, but state-sanctioned torture. And in what is now the largest open-air prison in the world, because that is what occupied Kashmir is. It is one Kashmiri to literally, one soldier, one Indian soldier to 10 Kashmiris, quite literally. And you should all ask, we should all ask, why is this needed? This is needed, ladies and gentlemen, because at the heart of this problem, on the mass graves, the rapes, the blindings, the pellets, the 72 years of oppression that we don't even know about. At the heart of this problem is India's attempt to not just contain the resistance offered up by the brave Kashmiris, but also to contain the story. It is to contain the story, not let the news filter out. And we have seen mention of several news channels and outlets that have taken this up. They have taken it up because India has inadvertently shot itself in the foot. It has internationalized a dispute that had gone into the back files of many governments and the back of the computer of many scholars. But it is injustice personified in the most egregious ways. And India, for the second time, ironically, in the world, it's for the second time that it has internationalized the Kashmir dispute. For all those who are students of history or know as part of history, in 1948, it was India that took Kashmir to the United Nations, where 11 UN resolutions remain to this day mandating the plebiscite that the Kashmiris so desperately and with the risk of their lives ask for. It is India again with its action on August 5th, which was illegal, and it is an illegal annexation that they perpetrated in the full glare of the world. And what has it done? It has brought notice and shock and even despair. But India's friends today now, India's own friends, its strategic allies, are both angry and many are ashamed. We value those who see international order as resting and pivoting on justice. But right now, India and many countries in front of us are trying to redefine the global order as entirely based on power. And I don't mean soft power. I mean military power. And that has become the new normal. Shabash Bey also mentioned the failure of the international order, or the collapse of the international order, which is literally a fact. It must draw legitimacy, as it was supposed to after the Second World War, in the formation of the United Nations, from credible justice and the maintenance of that global order on the norms of law and justice. Right now, there is an open and flagrant departure from that, and in doing what it did on August 5th, India has not just slapped the Kashmiris in the face, or Pakistan, which has a locus standi on Kashmir, both internationally, politically, and diplomatically, but it has slapped the United Nations in the face. Let's call a spade a spade. It has literally done that. So I think it is very important to make a note of, there are very big thought leaders in the room. I'm just going to say a few things on what I see is happening. 3 things. One is that the Kashmiris will fight New Delhi. They will fight it like they have never fought it before. They will break the curfew. They keep breaking this curfew. And if this was a Garcia novel, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the Nobel Prize winning author, it would have been called 72 years of terrible oppression, even solitude, because the Kashmiris, other than a few countries like us, have been alone in fighting. They have been alone in fighting, and let me tell you what we hear from the valley and from our friends in the rest of Kashmir. Everybody has families across all lines of control. They say that their determination has doubled now in the face of state terror, which we don't know about, because now the story has moved away a little bit from the headlines. You see many other stories, you see many other oppressions, but you don't see the Indian oppression of Kashmir hitting the headlines like it did, say, a month ago. So the first thing we must ask is, if that is going to be, if silence is going to be the default mode of the international community, who will assist these Kashmiris? And you really can't do anything other than speak out and urge the international community. And I'm going to provide a few steps I think we should take. The Indians now are seeking to contain the story once again. And there are very, very brave voices, also from India, but from the international media, that go in and try to leak out the story. And we now see in the India shining narrative, witness huge cracks, huge, inelegant cracks in that story. And indeed, it is a spectacular failure of Indian diplomacy and democracy in the way 13,000 people are detained even today. And those are the numbers we have, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know. We don't know how many more are detained and what unspeakable torture they go through. 13,000 includes men and young men. It includes political leaders who have built accommodations with New Delhi over the last 40, 50 years. These are leaders who have built accommodations with Delhi to stay within India. They too are shocked, appalled, and are not willing to accept the status quo as India wants to create. So this division of power will not stay the way it is. The worm has turned in Kashmir. These are brave, resilient people, and those young Kashmiris who did not even want to look at politics, they wanted jobs, they wanted peace, they wanted their everyday lives to go on. They have now been radicalized. They have forced to be radicalized. No household is exempt from a tragedy. So I think what we need to do is understand, the second point I want to make is very clearly, and it's been made very effectively before, but it bears repeating. After this annexation, the potential, the escalatory potential for, I won't suggest nuclear Armageddon, but for further conflict and destabilization of the region is very, very dangerous and could possibly be imminent. Why? Because India has converted most of its forward bases into permanent ones. It has 81% of its air force pivoted towards Pakistan. The defense minister recently started posturing about abandoning India's no first use nuclear policy, which in my mind is hugely irresponsible for a defense minister of any nuclear country, with two nuclear neighbors who have fought 4 wars over Kashmir. And thirdly, the line of control, now which saw a ceasefire in 2003, which was holding until quite recently, a few years ago, is now a hot line of control. It daily witnesses small arms and heavy artillery attacks, and we have many casualties, including Pakistani soldiers and innocent civilians. So all is not okay, as India tries to tell people. The India infotainment machine is constantly barraging the news waves 24/7 that all is normal. It is very far from normal in any part of Kashmir. And I think we should take notice of that as policymakers and thought leaders. The permanent curfew, as I said, is entirely politically and strategically unsustainable. India has overplayed its hand. And we now have, as I said, its friends making comments. And we need to appreciate those 45 MPs in the UK who have written to the United Nations Secretary General, the US congressmen and senators who have just had 2 congressional hearings on Kashmir, and the senators who tried to go. There are several American senators who tried to go to this occupied valley because they're the great friends of India. They were stopped, like most of the independent journalists. There is not even a humanitarian corridor into Kashmir, into occupied Kashmir. And they then came to Pakistan, and they were taken on a full tour of the Kashmir that we host, Azad Kashmir. They were taken on a full tour, and they turned around and they said, well, this is a canard, this is a lie that India is floating. If all was well, if schools were open, if the communications iron curtain had been lifted, and if the bazaars, the shops, the marketplace, and the mosques were open, we would have been allowed in. In India, the greatest democracy, the largest democracy in the world, it is not allowing Kashmiris even to go to prayer on Eid, on 12th Rabiul Awwal. It is not allowing Muharram processions. This is the freedom of religion that India promised in its constitution, very far from what Jawaharlal Nehru said. And indeed, it is taking on a largely extremist face in the way we saw the Ayodhya verdict. The day the Ayodhya verdict came, Pakistan had opened its Punjab gateway in a Kartarpur corridor to the Sikhs of the region. They come there to the birthplace of their leader, and Pakistan, in sharp and stark contrast, has said that any temples destroyed, we rebuild. And I'm from Sindh and the Pakistan People's Party and Muhtarma Shaheed's party, and it is very much our credo that there must be no abuse of religion. Everyone is a Pakistani citizen and must have equal rights. That is clearly not happening in the secular constitution of India today, ladies and gentlemen. And they must be called out for what it is. They cannot and must not be allowed to run the world and dismantle the world order as they see fit. And in the first order, what can we do? What can we do? And I think meetings like this are crucial for a call to action. We must use this for a call to action and see that there is an opportunity in every crisis. In this crisis, you know that friend or foe, all rational actors have become aware of what India has done. And they do understand the threats to not just regional peace, but the global order. And the prescient words of former President Bill Clinton come to mind when he said, Kashmir is the most dangerous flashpoint in the world. Why? Because cheek by jowl are two nuclear neighbors who have fought 4 wars with weapons bristling at each other. It would seem to me he was right. So even if those that are not concerned about international law or the basis of power in legitimacy, they should at least see the risk to their own countries, to their own people, to this planet, and take some action. And in this sense, I would like to remind people to use their good offices, to use their parliaments, to speak about these atrocious and egregious atrocities, but also to remind the world that there was no selective justice for South Sudan or East Timor. These disputes on the UN docket have been settled to their satisfaction, and they have brought with them, they have reduced strategic and economic risks to the world, and most importantly, they have renewed faith and hope in international law. To restore that, I think, in short order, we must all urge India to remove the blockade of information, to send back the troops it had called in. There are now actually almost 1 million troops inside occupied Kashmir, not 800,000, more than that. There's almost 1 million. And they must allow independent observers into the valley. They must let the Kashmiris speak. And the last step, and I'm going to conclude now, is of utmost importance. We all forget why this area why Kashmir is in turmoil. It is because they are denied the basic right that we all take for granted with our daily coffee, that they must choose who governs them, the inalienable right of self-determination. That is the heart of the problem. And to solve that, to navigate that, India and Pakistan have to talk. And for all those who think that the Shimla Agreement locks down the dispute or the conflict into a bilateral one, let me disabuse them of the notion that it does not exempt in any sense the United Nations Charter under which this Kashmir dispute is mandated. It is disputed territory. India has tried to even change the maps very recently, a few days ago. And to restore legitimacy in the global order, we have to seek as a first step that the Kashmiris' right to self-determination be constantly hammered home in all parliaments of the world, because they've been sensitized. Even the EU MPs have written about it. Every country. And in this particular sense, I would take time to really thank our Turkish co-hosts, because they have spoken truth to international power. They have mentioned it at the United Nations, which no other country other than Pakistan has. And we appreciate that. Speaking truth to power is one thing. Speaking truth to international power is going another step. And that is what's needed. What is also needed is countries and friends like Malaysia, Indonesia, Iran, and many others, all stakeholders such as yourselves, to understand that managing a crisis, which India is trying to do, and very badly, is not enough. It must end with justice, and it must end with a 5th generation of Kashmiris. This is the 5th generation that has been fighting for their right to self-rule, from the Dogra Maharajas. And this 5th generation must be given hope, and this particular episode must not end in despair for them. The valley, the stunningly beautiful valley that we speak of, Srinagar, has become a valley of dread, fear, and mass graves. Let us change the future for them, and let us do this together. Thank you very much for hosting us.